Hi, Vanessa Singh here, web design and development for Full Sail University. I'm going to be talking about my JavaScript files on events for the Rock Band project that I've been working on this month. The first thing that you see on the codes is the query selectors that I use to obtain the ID of the specific sections that I'm going to be working on. I divided each sections, labeling it with comments from which sections, which page this section belongs to, starting with the news page where I have a view more button where I'm using event listeners to subscribe a function to a specific event. So when the user clicks the view more button, is going to run the codes that are inside the function labeled more news. And looking into the code, what is happening here is that I'm using the XML HTTP request to connect to the JSON data that was provided to us and subscribe an article to a variable, and then use the insert at JSON HTML to insert that before the chosen element, that in this case is the last type of P in the news section, which is this one right here, where the view more button is. So to better show you, I have right here the news page. The first thing being displayed is the latest band news, but lower in here we have a more news section where at the bottom there is a view more button, and when clicked, boom, right there, more articles are being populated. It's not replacing the previous one that is here, is adding more articles in here. Since the data that it was given to us, they only had approximately 6 articles. So in this case, for this project, what basically it's doing is looping through the event section of the JSON file to add in more articles. So for the tour date page, what I have is a type of pagination where in the page is displaying one specific event. As we see here, we have the details for that event, and then we have down here the price for that specific event. So if the user wants to see other events that are available, they could either click the date that is listed below, or they can use a pagination. They can use buttons. This will basically be like a previews and next button, but instead of labeling next and previews, it will label the name of that event. The reason that I have it like that instead of saying next or preview in the buttons, as the design that I chose for the tour date HTML page, as you can see here in the image, it shows the name of the event instead of saying, next and previews in the button. So what I did for the tour dates HTML file, for the events, I had that once this file runs, if the page that's being loaded has an element with the ID of tour, then it will obtain the element of with the class of pagination, which is the buttons right here, specifically buttons that are inside the element of class of pagination. And then using the add event listeners, it will subscribe that function to the button. So when the user clicks the button, the code inside the function will run for both previous and next. And I labeled it previous and next for a better understanding, instead of having the name of the event, how it shows in the buttons. But for better understandings, is basically just the next and previous button. And both on each, the previous event and the next event functions, it both have the same code. The only difference is where one, the index is being subtracted, and the other one, the index is being added. And I'll explain with details. I'm also calling here the XML HTTP request because I am obtaining data from the JSON file that was provided to us. Now, one thing that I definitely had to keep in mind is the amount of element that is on the HTML file for tour dates, but as well the amount of data that it was provided to us in the JSON file. I have this if statement where it's verifying that if the index is less than 0, then assign the index the value of the length of the object in events section -1, because we know that for this section I believe the length is actually 6, but we know that when we call out an item by their index, it always starts in 0. So it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so no matter how many times the user clicks the previous button, when it reaches to 0, instead of going to -1, which that will cause the page to crash, it will go back to number 5 and then go down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, and then so on, so on. And the same thing I did for the next button. In this case, we are actually adding into the index. So once the last item in the JSON file, once the index reaches 5, instead of going to 6, it will go back to 0. So it will loop from 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, so on. Now, this section is actually quite interesting. I did it as simple as possible since this is a pretty simple page. Tour dates, new articles, and even contacts, they all have a form. It's very simple form, just name, email, and a message. So not every page has more than one form, so it makes it a little bit easier to work with the form where I can just verify that one form instead of having to verify multiple forms in one page. So demonstrating here on the page, this is the tour dates page where I have here, as I mentioned earlier, it is displaying the information of one specific event, and then it's displaying multiple events here where the user can either use pagination to change from one event to another, or they can click directly to a specific event that they want to read more information about. So to demonstrate to you how the event works, this basically will be the previous buttons. I'm gonna click on it, and as you can see, some information changes where the information rotates and the detail information change. As you can see, we're again back in Orlando, Florida. Shane again now is another event where the location is in Atlanta, Georgia. And as for the form, when clicked in and clicked out, if there's nothing in the input has no value, it will pop up a message saying the field is required. And the same for the news articles, where at the bottom it has a comment sections that is required to put the name and an email and a message before submitting any information. If there's no value in any of the inputs, it will pop up the error message. So this is my Rock Band project for the JavaScript event. Thank you for watching.